In a world where the rich think they're untouchable, one woman, a cleaning lady they all ignored, stood up against power, lies, and betrayal. Tonight, her courage will stop a billionaire's death, expose a web of corruption, and prove that justice sometimes comes from the most unexpected hands inside the Sterling mansion. The evening shimmered with wealth and pride. Chandeliers dripped golden light over velvet curtains, marble floors reflected diamond bracelets and polished shoes, and the air pulsed with the murmurs of 50 of Manhattan's most powerful guests. The kind of night where secrets hid behind. Polite laughter and every handshake was worth $1 million deal. In the center of it all stood Alexander Sterling, the billionaire everyone envied, tall, confident, untouchable. He raised his crystal glass of champagne, smiling as though the world bent to his will. Guests leaned forward, ready to hear his toast, ready to bask in the glow of power. The room was a stage, and all eyes were on him, until a voice tore through. The perfection like a knife. "Don't drink that." The words came from the corner, sharp, urgent, trembling yet unshakable. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, brows furrowed, and gasps cut the air. Standing near the edge of the room, dressed in her simple uniform, was Kesha Washington, the maid, the cleaner, the woman no one ever noticed. Her chest rose and fell, eyes blazing with a fire that stunned the guests into silence. For a moment, the only sound was the champagne bubbling softly in Alexander's glass. Victoria Blackwood, Alexander's elegant fiancée draped in emerald. Silk broke the silence with a laugh that tried too hard. "She's lost her mind. Ignore her, darling. These people, they invent stories for attention." She reached out toward Alexander's arm, her voice dripping with condescension. Her smile polished yet trembling at the edges. "She's a cleaner, for God's sake." But Kesha did not lower her eyes, nor did she retreat. She stepped forward, her voice steadier this time, carrying the weight of truth. "She tampered with your glass. Don't drink it. She's trying to poison you." Gasps filled the room. The wealthy, who thrived on gossip but feared scandal, looked from Victoria to Kesha as though caught in a storm they hadn't prepared for. Alexander froze, the glass hovering in his hand, his confident smile vanishing. He looked at Kesha, then at Victoria, confusion hardening into suspicion. He wanted to laugh, to dismiss it, but something in Kesha's eyes, unflinching, raw, and certain, rooted him to the spot. In that tense silence, the world seemed to fall away, and Kesha's mind pulled back to the journey that had brought her here. Once she had been more than a uniform with a name tag. She had been a student at Howard University, a brilliant chemist who dreamed of changing lives with her research. Professors admired her precision, her curiosity, her ability to solve what others couldn't. She had been unstoppable until the day envy and corruption destroyed her. A false accusation, a rigged investigation, her reputation shredded in the press. Her career ended before it began. The laboratories closed their doors to her, scholarships vanished, and suddenly the young woman who could have cured diseases was scrubbing floors to survive. Years passed, and she became invisible, cleaning the glass windows of those who never looked her in the eye, overhearing whispers of affairs, secrets, business deals laced with greed. She saw more than they thought, remembered details they dismissed, pieced together truths while polishing their marble floors. The world thought she had been broken, but in silence she sharpened her mind, waiting, watching, learning. And tonight, after years of swallowing her pride, she would no longer be invisible. Tonight, her voice would not be ignored. Her words struck Alexander harder than he expected. He studied Victoria, the woman he planned to marry, whose touch had warmed his hand 1,000 times. She stood rigid, her lips tight, her eyes darting just enough to betray her mask. Kesha's presence, this maid he had never once truly seen, suddenly burned brighter than the chandelier above them. "Think," Kesha urged, her tone fierce yet pleading. "How many times has she handed you your drink? How many times has she asked about your will? Your company shares. You don't see it, but I do. You've trusted the wrong person." The guests shifted uneasily, their whispers threading through the air like smoke. Alexander's arm lowered, the glass trembling in his hand. For the first time in years, the man who believed he controlled every moment of his life hesitated. He stood between two women, one he loved, glittering with beauty and charm, and one he ignored, standing in her plain uniform with nothing but truth on her side. Which one held the key to his survival? Which one was lying? Which one dared to risk everything to save him? The mansion, once buzzing with confidence and power, now hung suspended in silence. Every guest watched, waiting for Alexander's choice. In that stillness, Kesha knew this was the moment her entire life had prepared her for. She was no longer just the maid. She was the witness, the survivor, the one voice that could not be silenced. And Alexander Sterling, billionaire and master of his world, now had to decide. Would he believe the woman he thought he knew, or the maid he never saw? The glass in his hand gleamed under the chandelier, a symbol of wealth, trust, and death. His fingers tightened. His eyes shifted, and the night balanced on the edge of truth. The ballroom filled with restless murmurs, whispers tumbling like dominoes, from one guest to the next. Eyes darted, heads shook, and a wave of disbelief swept across the glittering room. "She's delusional," someone hissed, a maid with wild fantasies. Others nodded quickly, eager to dismiss the outburst, desperate to cling to the order and comfort wealth had always promised them. The world of the powerful thrived on appearances, and Kesha's accusation was chaos made flesh. Victoria's laughter pierced through the noise, brittle and forced, sharp as broken glass. She pressed a manicured hand to her chest, her emerald dress shimmering beneath the lights. "This is absurd," she sneered. "Are we truly entertaining the madness of a janitor?" She's jealous, bitter, and clearly unstable. The crowd murmured in agreement, yet something was off. Her tone was too shrill, too defensive, and beneath the perfect contour of her face, beads of sweat began to form, sliding across her temple despite the cool hum of the air conditioning. Kesha's voice cut through the skepticism with calm precision. "Check her cabinet upstairs," she said firmly, her eyes locked on Alexander. "Behind the vanity drawers you'll find vials, small glass containers she thought were hidden. They're not cosmetics. They're compounds, mixtures that can mimic a sudden heart failure. And those packages delivered when you were away? They weren't flowers. They were shipments, chemicals hidden under false labels. She knew exactly when to order them, when you would not be home." The murmurs turned to uneasy gasps. Faces that once dismissed her now leaned forward, curious, unsettled. Kesha's words painted pictures that could not easily be erased. Alexander's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched, and he turned slowly toward the woman he thought he knew best. "Victoria," his voice rumbled, cold as steel. "Answer her. Now." Victoria's lips parted, her perfect composure cracking. "Darling, you cannot possibly believe," she began, but her voice wavered, her eyes darting across the crowd, searching for sympathy, for escape. "This is beneath you. She's inventing fairy tales because she envies what we have." She laughed again, but the sound was hollow, fragile. Every hesitation, every tremor in her tone betrayed her. Alexander's grip on the champagne glass tightened, then slowly lowered to his side. His gaze burned into her, demanding truth she could no longer hide. The guests, silent now, were caught in the gravity of the moment. The maid's words had shifted the balance of the night. Kesha did not flinch under the scrutiny of dozens of wealthy eyes. She spoke with authority, her tone carrying a weight no cleaner's uniform could disguise. "I am not guessing. I am a chemist. My field was toxicology. I spent years studying compounds that kill slowly, silently, without trace. And what she planned for you tonight, what she placed in that glass, was not chance. It was science. It was deliberate, and it was meant to end your life before sunrise. Gasps rippled again, sharper this time. A voice from the crowd cut in, measured and professional. Dr. Henderson, a respected toxicologist who had built his reputation on integrity, stepped forward. "She speaks the truth," he said, his tone grave. "What she describes is scientifically accurate. A substance introduced at the right concentration could mimic natural cardiac arrest, detectable only under specific analysis. Few outside the field would even know such compounds exist. This woman clearly understands what she's talking about." His words fell like a gavel, the authority undeniable. The ballroom, once buzzing, with laughter and clinking glasses, now felt like a courtroom. Keisha, the woman in the uniform, had transformed into something more, an expert, a witness, a protector. Yet behind her calm voice lay years of pain, years of silence. Her mind flickered back to 12 years ago, when she had been on the cusp of greatness. A young scientist at a pharmaceutical company, eager to make her mark, she stumbled across corruption, falsified trials, dangerous drugs pushed to market, executives pocketing millions while patients suffered. She tried to expose it, believing truth would protect her. Instead, they framed her, accusing her of theft, branding her a criminal. Overnight, she went from promising scientist to disgraced, outcast. No lab would hire her, no school would defend her. Her name was blacklisted, her brilliance wasted. And, with nowhere left to turn, she scrubbed floors in the very city where she once dreamed of saving lives. Every sweep of her mop, every polished surface was a reminder of what she had lost. But in those silent years, she listened. She observed. She pieced together fragments of conversations that others dismissed. And she never stopped being a scientist. Knowledge, after all, could not be stolen. Tonight was the night she reclaimed it. Her eyes locked on Alexander's, unwavering. "I have proof," she said, her voice carrying across the hushed room. "I didn't risk my dignity to come here empty-handed. You've been deceived. But I can show you the evidence." Victoria's mask shattered, her laughter gone, her eyes wild. The cracks in her perfect image spread like fractures in glass. She stepped back, cornered, her composure unraveling. The guests leaned closer, their certainty shaken, their sympathy shifting. The woman they ignored now commanded the room. And the billionaire who thought he had everything found himself clinging to the one voice he had never thought to hear, the voice of the maid who was never just a maid. Kesha's hand moved with quiet certainty as she reached into the pocket of her plain uniform. The guests, breathless with anticipation, leaned forward, their jewels catching the light as their bodies shifted in unison. What could a maid possibly produce that would matter in a room full of power? The answer gleamed in her hand. A small, black recorder, simple, unremarkable, yet heavy with truth. She held it up for all to see, her fingers steady while Victoria's composure shattered piece by piece. "No," Victoria whispered almost too low to hear. Then louder, sharper, panicked. "Stop her! Don't you dare listen to anything she says!" She spun toward the exit, but two of Alexander's security men, tall and silent, stepped into her path, their broad shoulders forming a wall. Trapped, she clutched her purse like a lifeline, her eyes darting with the feral desperation of someone whose lies had been cornered. Kesha pressed the button, and the room fell into silence so complete that even the chandeliers seemed to stop their glittering dance. Then came the sound. Victoria's voice, unmistakable, clear, cruel. "Antonio, it has to look natural. A glass of champagne, a sudden collapse. He's old enough, no one will question a heart attack." The recording was crisp, damning, every syllable dripping with intent. Then another voice joined hers, low and gravelly. Antonio Rossetti, the fixer whispered about in dark corners of Manhattan. For the right price, anything looks natural. The conversation unraveled like a noose, looping tighter with every word, sealing Victoria's guilt. Gasps filled the room, sharper than broken glass. Hands flew to mouths, eyes widened, and even the most skeptical guest recoiled as if the venom of her plan had already brushed against their own veins. Alexander's face drained of color. His fiancée, the woman he once believed would share his life, had plotted his death with clinical calculation. Victoria staggered back, her emerald gown glinting like the skin of a serpent under the unforgiving lights. "It's fake," she shrieked, her voice breaking. "A setup, a trick. She's manipulating all of you." Her words clawed at the air, desperate, but her trembling betrayed her. Kesha did not flinch. She reached into her other pocket and pulled out a stack of glossy photographs, their edges sharp, their images sharper. She stepped forward and held them up for Alexander first, then for the nearest guests. High resolution, undeniable. Victoria, captured in the dim light of the mansion's service entrance, a wad of cash exchanging hands with Antonio Rossetti. Her face tilted down, her disguise half-hearted, but clear enough to burn through any excuse. One photo, then another, each frame a nail in the coffin of her deceit. Alexander's knees nearly buckled beneath him. He clutched the back of a chair, staring at the images, then at the woman he thought he loved. His mind reeled. The laughter they shared, the whispers in the night, the trust he had offered, shattered. And as his heart broke, another truth came crashing in. $12 million, siphoned from his accounts, vanished under her careful manipulation. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was financial, strategic, devastating. The fortune he had built with sweat and sacrifice was bleeding out because of her. Victoria's voice rose into a scream, raw and unhinged. "It's all lies, fabrications. Do you hear me?" She snatched at the photographs, her hands trembling so violently that one slipped to the floor. A guest picked it up and recoiled, passing it back with wide eyes. The walls she had built with charm and beauty crumbled in seconds, and beneath them was nothing but greed. The crowd edged away from her as if her presence itself was poison. Their disdain was palpable now. Their whispered admiration turned to disgust. Alexander's silence was heavier than any accusation. He looked at her not as the woman he adored, but as a predator who had shared his bed, kissed his lips, and plotted his destruction. Her fury peaked, the mask finally gone. Her eyes blazed with venom as she spat out the confession she had tried so hard to bury. 3 years, she roared. 3 years I pretended to love you. Do you have any idea what it cost me? I deserved that fortune. I earned it. Her voice cracked, her chest heaving, and the room recoiled in horror at the naked greed spilling from her soul. Alexander straightened, his face hard, his hand trembling only slightly as he pulled his phone from his pocket. His voice was cold, final, carrying across the stunned silence. "Call the police," he commanded. Security moved instantly, their radios crackling as the weight of justice closed in on Victoria. She screamed, pleaded, cursed, her body shaking as she collapsed into a chair, her emerald gown pooling like a wilted jewel around her. Guests began filing out, shaken, whispering as they went. Some left in silence, others muttered about betrayal, about the dangers of trusting appearances. The Sterling mansion, once a place of celebration, now felt like a tomb, and in the center of it all stood Keisha. The maid no one had seen, the woman no one valued, revealed now as something far greater. She was the scientist who understood the poison, the investigator who uncovered the truth, the protector who saved a life. Her presence, once dismissed, now commanded respect. Alexander looked at her, his voice soft, almost broken. "You saved me." For the first time in years, Kesha stood tall, not as the invisible cleaner, but as the woman who had ripped the mask off privilege and exposed the venom underneath. Tonight, in the ruins of betrayal, the maid became the hero. The sirens wailed outside the mansion that had once been the stage for glamour and power. Victoria Blackwood, once the envy of every woman in Manhattan, was led away in handcuffs, her emerald gown torn and stained, her face streaked with tears. Cameras flashed as officers pushed her into the back of a squad car, her protests drowned out by the noise of justice. The trial that followed was swift and merciless. The evidence Kesha provided, the recordings, the photographs, the testimony of Dr. Henderson, was irrefutable. Victoria's lawyers clawed at technicalities, but the jury saw the truth with clarity. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty. The sentence was 15 years behind bars, and with it came the cruelest twist of fate. The woman, who once commanded servants with a flick of her wrist, now scrubbed prison toilets, her hands blistered, her pride reduced to ashes. The irony was bitter, a punishment more fitting than gold bars or iron chains could ever deliver. While Victoria's world collapsed into filth and obscurity, Kesha's life rose from the ashes of silence. News of her bravery spread far beyond the walls of Sterling's mansion. CNN sat her down for a live interview, the cameras framing her not as a cleaner but as a survivor, a scientist, and a hero. She sat tall, dressed in a crisp suit, her natural hair haloed under the studio lights. She spoke not of revenge, but of truth. She explained how knowledge had been her shield, how integrity had been her compass. Viewers across the nation listened, in awe, realizing that the woman once overlooked carried a voice stronger than the wealthy she had exposed. Overnight, her name became a symbol of courage. Alexander Sterling, humbled and transformed by betrayal, knew he owed her more than gratitude. He stood beside her at a press conference, his voice steady as he announced the creation of the Sterling Foundation for Whistleblower Protection. A $15 million program designed to protect and empower those who dared to speak truth against corruption. It was his way of repaying the debt he could never truly settle. Kesha would lead the initiative as the Director of Scientific Investigations at Sterling Enterprises. Her position earned not through pity, but through undeniable brilliance. For the first time since her downfall, she walked into a laboratory, not as an outcast, but as a leader. Her first act was personal and deliberate. She turned her gaze back to the company that had destroyed her 12 years earlier, Pharmac Industries. Armed with a team, with funding, and with the power of truth, she reopened the files, dissected the lies, and uncovered the corruption that had once silenced her. Trials followed. Executives who had lined their pockets while patients suffered were finally dragged into the light. The empire that had destroyed her crumbled, and justice, though late, arrived in full. The woman they had buried under lies had risen to bury them with truth. Meanwhile, Victoria faded into obscurity. In prison, the glamour was stripped away. The friends who once clung to her at galas vanished like smoke. No one visited, no one called. She was forgotten, another nameless inmate reduced to labor and routine. At night, as she lay on her thin mattress, she replayed her downfall in her head, consumed by bitterness. She had lost everything, and worse, she had been replaced in every way by the maid she once mocked. Kesha, on the other hand, embraced her new role with grace. Standing at a podium before a packed auditorium, she delivered words that would echo far beyond that room. Her voice carried strength, each syllable etched with the weight of her journey. To anyone underestimated, she said, her eyes sweeping across the crowd, remember this: knowledge is power, but knowledge without integrity is a weapon. Integrity with knowledge, however, will always defeat arrogance with privilege. The applause that followed shook the hall, but more powerful than the sound was the hope it ignited in those who had once been silent. 2 years later, the story came full circle. Kesha and Alexander stood together, not as billionaire and maid, but as equals. Their wedding was small, intimate, without the spectacle of chandeliers and whispered deals. It was not wealth that bound them, nor gratitude, but respect. Two souls, forged in fire, one scarred by betrayal, the other by injustice, stood side by side, united by shared values. They built a partnership rooted in trust, the kind neither fortune nor schemes could buy. The world, watching from a distance, learned, a lesson that could not be ignored. In the beginning, Kesha Washington had been invisible, a shadow in the homes of the rich, a nameless figure dismissed as unworthy of attention. But in the end, she became the voice of justice, the face of resilience, the embodiment of truth. And the story whispered its warning to all. The person you dismiss today may hold the power to decide your fate tomorrow. The chandeliers had once lit Victoria's deceit, but now they shone upon Keisha's triumph, a reminder that no darkness can bury the light of truth forever.